partially, so much of our cultural diet is connected to media. And whether that's podcasts, that's music, that's books, that like really examining your media diet, I think is a big piece of that. And what are the proactive ways as a family that you can get access to more education that's going to fit your preferences, right? That some families are big readers, and the idea of taking on a book a month can be huge. Or it could be that you love listening to podcasts when you're in the kitchen, and maybe you haven't heard the 1619 series from the New York Times yet. Or that you could be listening to folks like Alicia Garza, Black Lives Matter co-founder, who has 2 podcasts, one with Ai-jen Poo and then another, Lady Don't Take No. That's her personal one. So there's definitely no lack of leaders to follow. And then the other great thing in the nation's recent attention around systemic racism, lots of great book lists that have been put out. And that some, I would note, of my like favorite historical fiction that is like beach books is things like The Warmth of Other Suns, that tracks the migration of Black families from the South out west and north. And it is a racial justice story, but it's also just fantastic writing. Similarly, Maria Hinojosa, who you may know as the host of Latino USA, that's another phenomenal program. I'm a senior contributor to Forbes, so one of the perks of that is I get access to pre-publication books. Maria's book is going to be out in September, and it is phenomenal. That I just basically turned over my entire weekend to it. And really getting into the depth and history of Latino organizing in the US is great. So I think that's a big piece. And then the other is not just consuming, but discussing. And I don't know your background, Denise, and I also get that our own positionality. I definitely, I can't see everyone. I also don't want to be making an assumption that I'm only speaking to white people, right? That everybody has their personal blind spots. And I think it can be kind of just taking on what's an issue that I really don't know about, or that I might hold some attitudes in that maybe I want to address. So I think that's the other as a family, that in order to do that diet, first you got to do the audit, right? So also looking at what's in the cupboards that needs some cleaning out. What are attitudes that you might want to question? So I can give a short example of that. I struggled for a really long time with the thought in the immigration debates of like, well, these are people who broke the law, right? And that I think one of the things of growing up white in America is that you often think that laws kind of make sense, right? And they tend to benefit you, and you're supposed to be law abiding, and that's very highly valued, which is very different than a perspective that unjust laws are not meant to be followed. I forget if that's Martin Luther King or sort of some activists who had had that quote, so don't credit that to me. But parsing through what is and isn't an unjust law, and really learning over time, one, that immigration, crossing a border used to be a civil offense, and that it's only more recently that became a criminal offense. And that also, given how incredibly complex the immigration system has become, we really don't leave people with a lot of options to be able to go through existing channels. And at the same time, we continue to turn a blind eye on industries that are so dependent on undocumented labor, treating them terribly in the process, right? That this is like all stories, right? There's a money story behind that story that maintains the status quo. And then it positions immigrants to be lawbreakers. So then folks who believe in law abidingness see that as bad, right? And it took me about a year of interrogating that and doing more reading and self-education for me to decide essentially that for myself, that I felt like those immigration laws are unjust laws and don't always deserve to be followed. And I think that that's a perspective that a lot of undocumented immigrants hold. So at any rate, I'm not saying that particular one is right or wrong, but just to say that sometimes we have to examine where our assumptions come from in order to move past them.